Turkey has recorded stronger first-quarter economic growth than some of its peers. The figures cover the 3 months before lockdowns to contain the coronavirus brought much of the economy to a standstill. Gross domestic product grew 4.5% year-on-year in the first quarter, driven mainly by a surge in government spending and household consumption, which rose just over 5%. The country's trade deficit widened to $12.9 billion, as the pandemic had already affected major trading partners in Asia and Europe. A rise in infections, however, meant the government had to implement stricter shutdowns and weakened curfews. While this strategy and a strong healthcare system has helped Turkey avoid the crises experienced in the US or Europe, it's still expecting a sharp contraction in economic growth in the second quarter. To help companies cope with the fallout, the government has provided a $38 billion financial lifeline. And although the International Monetary Fund has forecast the economy will shrink by about 5% this year, Ankara believes positive growth is still possible.
Bu krize rağmen %5, %8, %10 değil.
Despite the crisis, instead of contracting 5 to 10%, God willing, we will see positive growth at the end of the year.
That depends on major income generators such as tourism. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has confirmed most lockdown restrictions will be lifted starting next week, meaning hotels can reopen and hopefully revive the sector.
Travel restrictions between provinces will be completely lifted as of June the 1st. Restaurants, cafes, beaches, parks, museums, daycare centres and kindergartens will also reopen on the same date. We'll follow these developments and if needed, we can reimpose this restriction.
The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development expects the Turkish economy to bounce back with growth of 6% in 2021. While recovering from the pandemic will be challenging, an improvement in economic confidence this month shows that Turks are keen to pick up where they left off earlier this year. Sibel Karkus, TRT World.
Well, for more on this, let's speak to Cevdet Akcay. He's the former Chief Economist at Koç Financial Services and Yapi Bank. Welcome to Money Talks, Cevdet. Now, some welcome news on the Turkish economy. Can you tell us what drove this 4.5% expansion in the first quarter?
It's actually very typical Turkish growth when you look at the composition. Moderate private consumption, some public consumption contribution, 3 percentage points and 1 percentage point to be exact. But since the economy is growing, you have imports also growing and stealing from growth and quite substantially by 5.8 percentage points. So exports contributing 0.3 and imports stealing from growth 5.8. You have a net export contribution of minus 5.8 percentage points. So that's the typical Turkish problem with growth composition. And on the plus side, you could say you have 7 percentage points coming from inventory buildup. Now, that's good and bad at the same time. It's good because it tells you that companies and corporates are quite optimistic about the future, therefore piling up their inventories. But this very unfortunate joint demand and supply shock with the COVID is going to be changing that quite substantially. So upcoming quarters' growth is going to be impacted very adversely with this inventory buildup because since demand is not going to be there in any discernible fashion or quite less than it was a year ago, whatever the demand is, it's going to be met by this inventory buildup rather than new production. So going forward, it's going to be quite challenging for the economy to reach the level where it was at the end of 2018, the beginning of 2019, etc. So it's going to be challenging. Statistically, this is what we call a level shift. And this doesn't happen very frequently in metrics like industrial production, capacity utilization, and GDP. You plunge, and then you try to catch up where you were a year ago. And that's exactly the kind of problem that we're going to be facing. But this is not peculiar to Turkey. This is peculiar to every country in the world at this moment. And I don't think Turkey is going to be one of the most severely hit, by the way.
No.
But I'm not expecting positive growth rates for this year. I think that's quite infeasible.
And just very quickly, because we're running out of time, Cevdet, as I mentioned, Turkey imposed lockdown measures. They weren't as severe as the measures we saw in Italy and Spain, but they did basically shut down the retail and hospitality sectors and impacted the lucrative tourism industry. So what can we expect from this current quarter when we do get the numbers in a couple of months' time?
It's going to be huge. It's going to be very substantial. Let me give you a very crude example to cut it short. If you tell every consumer, producer, tourist, whatever you call them, doesn't matter, every economic agent, that whatever they were doing in, say, the September of 2019, they will be able to do 2/3 of everything in the September of 2020. I think everybody will be very happy to hear that. But what does that correspond to? It corresponds to 33% reduction in economic activity. So I don't think we have comprehended quite well what all this shock amounts to. But I'll repeat that again. This is not a Turkish phenomenon. It's a very, very global phenomenon.
Sure is. Okay, Cevdet Akcay, former Chief Economist at Koç Financial Services, thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you.